حتى إذا أتوا على واد النمل قالت نملة يا أيها النمل ادخلوا مساكنكم لا يحطمنكم سليمان وجنوده وهم لا يشعرون.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, dear brothers and sisters. I hope you are all well and have had a wonderful Eid celebration given the circumstances that we're under. Hope you and your family, alhamdulillah, have benefited much from the blessed month of Ramadan, and may we continue in the spirit of Ramadan, post-Ramadan, continue to gain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So today, inshallah ta'ala, in a brief presentation, I wanted to look at a verse from the Quran about some lessons that we can take from the ants. So there is a Surah Naml, a surah, number 27, which is named after the ants. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions a brief story of a community of ants. And as you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He had given Sulaiman alayhi salam great kingdom where he was not only did he have under his command the human beings, but he had under his commands the jinns and the birds, and they were also part of his army. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in verse number 17 of Surah Naml, which is chapter 27, he mentions أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وحشر لسليمان جنوده من الجن والإنس والطير فهم يوزعون, and gathered for Sulaiman were his soldiers from the jinn, from men and birds, and they were marching in rows. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions the story of the ants in the next verse, where He subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, حَتَّى إِذَا أَتَوْا عَلَى وَادِ النَّمْلِ قَالَتْ نَمْلَةٌ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّمْلُ ادْخُلُوا مَسَاكِنَكُمْ لَا يَحْتِمَنَّكُمْ سُلَيْمَانُ وَجُنُودُهُ وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. And until when they came upon the valley of the ants, and an ant said, "O ant, enter your dwellings, that you not be crushed by Sulaiman and his soldiers while they perceive not." So I wanted to have a look at this ayah today and look at some of the lessons that we can actually learn from this ayah, because everything in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has revealed it for a purpose, for a wisdom, for a benefit of guidance for those who follow and read the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'll share the screen and then we can look at the verse, inshallah, and then look at some of the points of interest in the verse and also some of the lessons that we can actually learn. So brothers and sisters, if you're just joining me just now, then it would be great if you can actually share this broadcast with others at the same time as you watch, so others can actually benefit, inshallah ta'ala, from this. So you should be able to see the screen. I'm hoping you're able to see the screen. So just to make sure that you can hear me, you can see me, send me some likes and love, so to make sure that everything's actually working. So I'm not just talking to myself. Yes, I think we are live, alhamdulillah. And you can see the verse on the screen now, hopefully. So this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells us, when Sulaiman alayhi salam was on the march with his army, that he was coming onto a valley. حتى إذا أتوا على واد النمل, and when they came to a valley of the ants. Now, in the previous verse, Allah mentioned that Sulaiman alayhi salam was on a march. وَحُشِرَ لِسُلَيْمَانَ جُنُودُهُ مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ وَالطَّيْرِ فَهُمْ يُوزَعُونَ, and gathered for Sulaiman were his soldiers of the jinns, men and birds, and they were marching in rows. And that just gives you a picture of the powerful army of Sulaiman alayhi salam, which was a unique army, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he had given him great power over. Hopefully you can see I've got a slide with a couple of pictures alongside with the verse for us to just make it easy to understand this verse. So you can see on the picture itself, at the bottom you can see a marching army on the left hand side, and you can see a community or a colony of ants. So let's look at the verse, inshallah. I'm going to use the annotator to talk about some of the features of this verse, and then we can look at some of the lessons that we can actually learn from this verse. So if I take the annotator, there we go. So the Mufassirin, they often comment on this verse of the fasaha, the eloquence of language that's been mentioned in the verse, especially what this ant actually said. And they've mentioned, like, many items of eloquent speech that has been mentioned. So I'll mention some of those points just to appreciate the beauty of the Quran, and also to appreciate the wisdom of this ant community. And there is much lessons that we can actually learn from it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you mentioned in the previous verse, as I said earlier on, that Sulaiman alayhi salam was on a march. وَحُشِرَ لِسُلَيْمَانَ جُنُودُهُ مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ وَالطَّيْرِ فَهُمْ يُوزَعُونَ, and gathered for Sulaiman or his soldiers from jinn, men and birds, and they were marching in rows. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this verse, حَتَّى إِذَا أَتَوْا عَلَى وَادِ النَّمْلِ. So until they came to a valley of ants. And here we see here a قالت نملة, an ant said, an ant that said. Now there's much debate whether it's a female ant, whether it's a male ant, in the books of tafsir, but for the purpose of discussion today, we'll just we won't debate that particular point. It's an ant. So this ant, he said, Ya ayyuhan naml. Yeah, Ya ayyuhan naml. It said, oh ants, oh ants. So here, the first point to note is that there is this ya that's been used. This is called harfun nida. This is is the vocative particle. It is to actually draw attention. So that's one aspects of the language is this, this use of harf nida to draw attention. Secondly, that there is also this ha that's been used here. This is called harf tanbih. It's not only to draw attention, but it's also, it's like, it's a warning. It's drawing attention, raising a sense of urgency. So this ya ayyuha has this notion of, calling with a sense of urgency to pay attention. And also this is for, for ba'id, for calling out so that everyone can actually hear. So not only the ants which are near, because if you want to just make it a near call, you say, ya namal, oh ants. You say ya ayyuhan namal. It has also the sense of you're calling out far and wide, so that everyone of the actual community of the ants can actually hear your message, because this is a situation of emergency. This is a situation of urgency, where a great powerful army, not only made of men, but is made of men, jinn, and birds, which are marching, is going to be marching through the valley of the ants. So here we see this ant is making this nida, this call, with urgency, and this call is far and wide to make sure that everybody in the community pays attention. And this is a beautiful use of language which actually matches with the situation at hand, because the situation at hand is a very dangerous situation. It's a very harmful situation. So this is a point of eloquence. The other point that's been mentioned here, there's a command here. So, which is, there's an amr here, udkhulu, enter. So there is a amr that's been used. So you have a nida that's been made, a call, also a amr, a command is being issued. And something really interesting here, what you'll notice is that in the Arabic language, generally, غير عاقل, things which do not have intellect, they're treated as feminine. But here, the masculine forms are used. So this wow is for a masculine. You don't, it's not like udkhuli. Did not use the feminine form, or udkhulna, or of those types, but a masculine form is being used. And again, we see this pronoun here, kum, again, your dwellings are masculine. And again, there's a pronoun here, kum, la yahtimannakum, it's masculine. And the purpose of that is there's a balagha purpose, is that you're treating a non-intellectual entity and giving it the attribution of intellect in order to hyperbolize the actual situation itself, to so that to give it that characteristic of that, they have intelligence, and to understand what is actually being said. So there is another beautiful point of balagha that's been mentioned here. The other point which is to mention is that, the language is also said, masakinakum, enter your homes, right? Enter your homes. And there's an interesting point, which is, you would have thought, in an emergency situation, just, you say take cover or to get into a hole. But here, with, the instruction is to all the rest of the colonies is to go to their homes, meaning these ants, they have their own dedicated homes where they actually, generally after work, they would go and they would actually go and rest. And, and the word masakin, homes, is it's linked to the idea of sakina, is linked to the idea of sukun, to be calm, to be tranquil. So go to your homes where you find safety and tranquility, and you will feel calm. So it's a very specific type of instruction, to the ants, not just to take any cover, but to go back to your homes where you feel the tranquility and the comfort of your own homes. This is the advice, the nasiha of this wise ant, which is given to the ummah of the ants, or the community of the ants. So again, very beautiful advice. Now, what is important to note here is that, that you have this, warning that's being made by one of the ants, who's like raising the flag, if you like, the warning flag, which is keeping an eye out for the rest of the community. And it's worthwhile thinking about this in terms of, communities and the role of leadership, which we'll come to, inshallah ta'ala. There is also here what we see لا يحتمنكم سليمان وجنوده وهم لا يشعرون. So there is also a nahi, a prohibition as well. That's one way of looking at it. Yeah, that if you do not actually go to your homes, then inadvertently Sulaiman and his forces, they will crush you. And look at again the language that's being used. La yahtimannakum, very powerful language is being used, and very emphatic language. So if I just highlight a couple of points on that, then you can see. So first of all, hatm is destruction. It's absolute destruction. I mean, the ant didn't say you'll get crushed, or you'll break your bones, or so la yahtimannakum, will crush you, demolish you. So it's very emphatic language in terms of word choice that's being used. And secondly, what we see here, there is this there's this shadda on the noon. This is called the noon thaqila, like a heavy noon that's being used. And again, that's used for ta'keed. It's used for emphasis, to emphasize that this will certainly happen to you if you don't actually enter your homes. So it's very emphatic language, a language which is really suitable to the situation at hand. Also, we find, the mention here is Sulaiman. Again, first of all, this ant is very wise. Is aware of who this army is and who the leader of this army is. I mean, it's Sulaiman. I mean, he's well known, and his reputation is well known, and this particular ant is aware of this Nabi, of this king called Sulaiman. It shows this great awareness. It did not just say, some random army is just going to destroy you. It mentioned by name, it's Sulaiman. And to show urgency, did not say Nabi Sulaiman, did not say, Malik Sulaiman, just said Sulaiman, because you don't have a time to actually mention all the titles and everything, because it's an emergency situation, right? Just says Sulaiman. And not only did it say Sulaiman, it says wajunuduhu, and his army, right? So it's not only Sulaiman and his army. And there is, some benefits to this, which is it's not only Sulaiman, but it's his army. And look at the language, wajunuduhu, and his hosts, is using the plural. So this ant was not only aware of the leader, but is aware there was an army. But there was not only one army, there was like several contingencies in his army, as mentioned earlier on in the verse, وَحُشِرَ لِسُلَيْمَانَ جُنُودُهُ مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ وَالطَّيْرِ فَهُمْ يُوزَعُونَ, and gathered for Sulaiman of his soldiers, of jinn, of ints, and of birds. So the ant had this awareness of the nature of the army. You know, today you might think of it in terms of, you know, an army is composed of very, you know, different types of divisions. You have Air Force, you have, you know, you have the Navy, you have the army, you have different divisions. وَجُنُودُهُ, and his army. So great awareness and understanding of the situation in which they were actually dealing with it. And at the same time, you know, he said, وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, whilst they do not actually perceive, they're not actually sense you, because you're so small as a community, they're not going to actually see you. So unwittingly, they will actually crush you. At the same time, you know, making an excuse for Sulaiman and his army. Subhanallah, you know, in this verse itself, we see so much wisdom and so much hikmah about this community of ants, and specifically the wisdom and the leadership of this ant, which is advising you know, its followers, its community, of an impending danger from Sulaiman alayhi salam and his army as they were marching through this colony of ants. So brothers and sisters, there are much lessons to be learned from this verse. And I think it's important for us that, you know, when we actually look at these verses, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, you have to kind of think not only in terms of what's the basic meaning of it, but what are the lessons that we can actually learn from these verses. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He did not put a single verse in the Quran without a relevance to our lives. Whether as individuals, whether as families or communities, or the ummah, or mankind at large. So we have to think and we have to contemplate on the lessons which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is driving in these verses. So let's go to another slide, inshallah, where we can actually just look at some of the lessons that we can actually learn from this wonderful verse itself. So if we just look at some reflection points, we find here that, you know, first of all, we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He has created communities, whether the animal kingdom or whether the humanity, that we live in communities. We don't generally live as isolated individuals by ourselves. We have relationships. We have relationship with our families. We have relationship with our communities. We have relationships within the wider society, and we are living as an individual part of a collective, and that's something very important, that whenever we're thinking about our affairs, we have to think about not only our individual affairs, we have to think about our collective affairs. So the individual and the collective, they go hand in hand, and that's something very important. So we as a ummah, one of the lessons that we can learn from the example from this verse is that that we live in a community like this particular ant, when he was calling out to take, you know, shelter against an impending danger, that it was living part of a community. It was not living by itself, and therefore there's a sense of reciprocal duties and responsibilities and rights that exist as a result of relationships. So it's very important to think of ourselves as part of the whole, part of the collective, and not be someone who's always thinking about our own needs and our own desires or our own personal interest. We are part of a whole, and that's a very important point for us Muslims to really think about, because wherever we are living, in the world, whether we're living in the Muslim world or whether we're actually living, as small communities in the West, we are not as, isolated individuals. We are not just, some sort of minority. We are part of a global ummah. We are part of a Muslim brotherhood. We are part of a ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who are bonded by La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, in the way that the ants, they're a community, they are bonded. Yeah, they have relationship amongst themselves, and therefore we as Muslims, we've got to think about our ummah and the affairs of our ummah. Like this, this ant, قالت نملة يا أيها النمل. This ant said, oh, Naml, addressing all of the ants in the community, addressing them. We as Muslims, we have to have that concern and that care and that love for our ummah. Wherever we are this ummatul Islam, and we have to have that relationship and that care and that concern. The second point is the issue of importance of leadership. Every community, whether it's, in the animal kingdom, or whether it's, in the kingdom of men, yeah, there's always a need for leadership. Leadership is essential. It's necessary. You can't escape it. It is part and parcel of life. Every community will have leadership, whether it's good leadership, whether it's bad leadership. Nevertheless, there will be leadership, and leadership has a fundamental impact on the lives of the community, of the society, in fact, the entire world itself. And here we are seeing an example of leadership. What does it mean to lead? What does it mean to look after the affairs of your community? What is the meaning of politics? And the essential meaning of politics. This word politics has a very bad reputation, and it does have a bad reputation in so far as being a dirty word, because of reputation of secular capitalistic politics. Because what we see in secular capitalist politics is the politics of envy, the politics of selfishness, the politics of power and greed, and so forth. And we see the scandals upon scandals, and therefore has gained a very bad reputation as a term and as an idea to be involved in politics. But politics in Islam, politics based on Islam, is something completely different. It is completely different to the politics of the West. The politics of the West is a politics of greed and selfishness and corruption. Politics in Islam is to look after the affairs of people, is to make sure the affairs of people is looked after. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-Imamu Ra'in wa huwa mas'ulun an ra'iyati. The Imam, he's a guardian, he is a shepherd, he is responsible for his flock. The purpose of politics is a responsibility, it's a guardianship, it's to look after the affairs of the people. And here we are seeing a great example from the animal kingdom, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing that this leader, or this Naml, this ant, takes leadership position, showing care and concern to look after the affairs of the community. And in this case, an impending danger from a mighty army which is about to crush their colony itself. And we see, Ya ayyuhan Naml, this call, udkhulu masakinakum لا يحتمنكم سليمان وجنوده وهم لا يشعرون. Enter your homes, and to go to a place of security and safety. Yeah, lest Sulaiman and his army, they demolish you and destroy you, and whilst they are unaware. Here we find, subhanallah, that this Naml is concerned about the security and the well-being and the safety, of the lives and the interest of the wider community. Subhanallah, I think of this sometimes, and how I wish that we even if we had a fraction of the the mercy and the love and the care of this particular ant invested in any of our rulers today, we would be better off. Our rulers today, they don't even have the love, the care, and the mercy for the Muslims. Uh, uh, you know, more than this ant for its own community itself. And this is the tragedy. We are as Muslims desperately in need for a leadership that will look after our affairs. What we see in our countries, instead of sounding the alarm bells uh, for the Muslims to look after them, to protect themselves from the enemies of Islam who are invading our lands, left, right, center, who are stealing our resources. In fact, we find these so-called leaderships in our countries, they're in cahoots or in alliance with the very enemies of Islam who are marching through our lands with their hosts, having bases, whether military bases, that's jotted around in the Muslim world and so forth. You know the situation that the Muslim world is facing today. So we as Muslims, we're in desperate need of great leadership. And that great leadership, it will come about when we as Muslims begin to understand our responsibility as an ummah. We belong to an ummah, and we have a responsibility of engaging in Islamic politics. And the ultimate expression of Islamic politics, the ultimate expression of Islamic politics is the Khilafah system. It is the system by which we appoint an emir, we appoint a khalifa to rule us by the kitab and the sunnah, like of the past, where Umar bin Khattab, he was so concerned about not only the affairs of human beings, he was concerned about the affairs of animals, that he would say to himself that, how he used to worry about even if a goat fell on the tracks or on the road of Iraq, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will actually account him. This was the type of leadership that we had in the past. So brothers and sisters, inshallah ta'ala, jazakallah khair for joining me on this small ayat reflection from Surah Naml. I hope you benefit from this, inshallah ta'ala. And I will try in the future to do more of these reflections from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For now, jazakallah khair for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you soon, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.